All right, let's jump in. So, first question would be, tell me a little bit about what things were like for you before we started working together.
So things before, they were quite unstructured. So we had, elements of good, ideas, but they were not put together in a coherent form. And therefore they were also inconsistent. And most fundamentally, it was actually to do with the very basic of questions about what are you there for? What is your position in the marketplace? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And if you haven't done that, you haven't marshaled your thinking, you end up doing so many things which dissipates one's focus. And through this process, I think it's for me, it's the road to Damascus moment where you know exactly what is it that we want to be doing. So we're now beginning to, the last discussion, as Anastasia mentioned about partnering, is so important, because the very people who we saw as competitors, now we're seeing as, people we can collaborate with, because we're not trying to impede in their area. We know we're confident in our own skin as to what we want to go to market with, and therefore we can now bring them on board. So it's a far more collaborative, a lot more focused, that laser focus that we had talked about.
Perfect, thank you. What made you begin your search for someone to work with?
I think it's really quite interesting, and I've been thinking about this psychologically, is some of those messages that we saw in the early days about the pipeline, the challenges in terms of the stop and start side of things, and also people were coming in because of personal favors as opposed to the quality of our product and so on. So they really resonated with us. I think we had reached a certain point in our growth whereby, we couldn't crowbar or leverage our relationships anymore, because there's only so much of me to go around. So we needed to move into the next phase, the scaling up kind of thing. And that happens when you start thinking about processes, you start thinking about what is the experience looking like. So that really resonated at a visceral level with us, the key themes in the early days.
Tell me, Ali, what is your favorite part of working together?
To me, it's actually, of course, those sessions where you've got it's like the doctor's surgery, waiting. That's good. You sometimes learn something, but actually it's the personal one-to-one. And even that, it's the moment that you interact. I think that's really a lot more powerful. Because you're getting someone looking at it. So I think that's really very powerful from an experience perspective. The talks that you do on the Monday talks, I think they're really quite powerful, because they're not about the program as such, about the process, because that's really well defined. Are you with me? Here are the modules. This is what you've got to do. Fill the sheets, bring them back, and you see. I don't know if you have this thing. My kids, when they were young, they used to go to this school program, Japanese school program called Kumon. I don't know if you have that. Okay, and that worksheet kind of thing. It's a process that basically works fine, but having something that really forces you to step back and think about the big picture stuff. And I can see that, just in terms of the comments that people put in as well, that I think people like that ability to step outside the process as well.
Awesome, thanks. And what would you say are the top 3 benefits of working with Boutique Growth?
It's a tried and tested process. What it does, it actually expedites the journey. So we're not having to make the same mistakes and be here and, what would have taken us 3 years to get to that. and it is a very much a psychological as the principle sort of like within my firm, getting myself to the right mindset was really very important. And that's the thing about the less is more mantra is really very important. And that's very powerful by forcing those fundamental questions is what, you know, that's the the psychological mindset shift that we needed to go through. And the process provided that, enabled that, facilitated that we perhaps would have not done without.
What would you say helped you shift your mind, or most helped you make that mindset shift?
It's doing those the sheets. I mean, you know, when I've been a consultant for, you know, nearly coming up to 30 years. You know, I've done this kind of thing. I help other people through processes and so on. And so you think that, you know, you've got it all sussed out. Yeah. And you look at these sheets and you think, oh, God, I'm not going to fill this out type of thing, you know, mentally. So the part of you is rejecting it, but it's actually a really strong discipline. And it's quite interesting because now I've committed those things to paper, and me and Anastasia and I were just talking about this, is what we're going to do is keep them at the front of our minds by, you know, printing them off so that we keep reminding ourselves as to what the key decisions we took along the way, and thereby keeping us true and honest. So of course you know, what do you call it, Anastasia, the scorecard or whatever, the
Tracker?
The tracker, that's a really important device, but it's actually sort of like, I think one needs to interact with not just looking out visibly what the symptoms are, but keep going back and reminding oneself, that's why we're doing this, that's why we're doing this, and using that as a benchmark or you know, a decider, a decision support system as to what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. Yeah.
Perfect. And what would you say is the single biggest value that you've extracted from the program?
We have within the firm now, we now have a language, a common understanding, common tools and techniques that we can apply, which then can be rolled out. And, you know, when we didn't even have the language, we didn't even know how to express what we were feeling, but didn't know. Now we can sort of like say, well, you know, that part, you know, the tracker is showing this, or, you know, we haven't done the webinar, or we haven't done call outs. So, you know, what's the VSL sort of like? So it's those, I mean, you know, you can call it jargon, but the whole, we've entered into the world of, I was going to say Narnia, but the world of Ahmed Munawar, okay? With its own sort of like, you know, lingo and tools and techniques. And I think that's a really good device, because that's really has brought a schemata, a schema within our own sort of like brains that we can now use and relate to each other within the firm.
Perfect. And just circling right back to the beginning again, do you remember what it was that made you choose Boutique Growth?
Because it was appealing to us at a very deep, visceral, psychological level, because we were feeling those things already. And essentially what Ahmed sort of like, you know, marketing did, it came and it spoke and gave voice to that. And we just looked around. It was quite interesting because it wasn't just me, it was other principals within the firm. We kind of looked at each other and we said, this is exactly what we're feeling. And, you know, it was, and we would often not talk about it because it would, you know, so I'm on the sales guys or I'm on the business development side, and they didn't want to sort of like, you know, it felt like, oh, you know, he will get defensive or whatever. And the thing is, you know, I was feeling it myself. So by having that, you know, third party come in, raise those issues, you know, we all knew about the pipeline that, look, hang on a second, it was broken. You know, it's quite interesting to have gone through the C19 stress condition whilst we were with you, is I think we were able to weather that, and we are going to come out. You know, that key talk that Ahmed gave just after the the lockdown started, at least in the UK, was really critical. And he just sort of like said, some institutions, some houses are going to come out stronger out of this, some are not going to sort of like weather it well. And that it was at that moment in time, you know, I made a personal resolution, personal resolve that, you know, we're going to be the ones who come out stronger. And that is really powerful because we had the tools and techniques to guide us through that journey. And we are, you know, touch wood, I mean, sort of like it's really interesting in the world of consulting. There's, I don't know about your part of the woods, but certainly in the UK market, there's a lot of, unfortunately, layoffs going on. A lot of firms are contracting. And we're probably going to record this month as our record in terms of sort of like fee income. I'm not saying everything is going great. You know, there's a lot of challenge, a lot of the teams. We haven't had to lay anyone off. And in fact, we're actually bringing people on. So I think it's a really good story to have.
Terrific. And is there anything else you think is important to mention or that I forgot to ask you?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of like it's, we obviously sort of like, you appeal to us at that, you know, sort of like, as I said, you know, at that very deep level. There are, of course, other providers who do similar things, and we've been contacted, inundated at this time. I think sort of like the personal touch is very important, which is our story. You know, people go to PwC or they come to Hansuke. And the reason they come to Hansuke is because they know I've got skin in the game. They have a direct line to me, do you see? And I think that's an important quality to retain as you guys grow.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.